In today's video, we have all kinds of news to discuss, including some trade talk around the Winnipeg Jets and the Vancouver Canucks. Plus, we also have some pretty big signings today, including a signing in Edmonton. The Rangers have finally signed Lafreniere. We have several PTO announcements, a signing in Tampa as well. Arizona's extended their coach, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news to talk about here today. In case you missed it earlier, the big contract extension for Austin Matthews has been completed. I do have a video up on the channel analyzing the full details and giving my thoughts on it. So if you haven't already watched that, I'll link it here up in the YouTube cards. Essentially, it's a 4-year extension at $13.25 million. So decent value for what he delivers and what he brings to the Leafs. I know a lot of people really wish he would have been willing to commit more term. It's the richest contract in AAV wise, at least in NHL history, and it's only for 4 years. Something that the Leafs have certainly had a difficult time with their top players is getting an 8-year commitment, whereas most of the other franchises around the league have not. So I know that's something that a lot of Leaf fans I've seen find frustrating, but at least he's staying. You're getting more primetime years out of Austin Matthews at a respectable price. I mean, a lot of the other contracts, I know, if you compare them, you can't just compare, apples to apples today. You have to look at when Matthews signed, what was the cap at, when McDavid signed, when McKinnon signed, their age, how many years, all that. There's all kinds of different factors here that kind of go into this. So at the end of the day, I know a lot of people in the analytics community, they feel like it's an underpay, and that the Leafs could have paid him more, but where he only would do 4 years, I can understand. But anyways, the full contract analysis here on the channel in a separate video. Before we jump into the rest of the news, I just want to acknowledge something. I just seen a reminder on Twitter today, and I seen a news article or a written article for the Player Tribune site from Kevin Hayes. It's actually the 2-year anniversary on the passing of Jimmy Hayes. It's hard to imagine it's been 2 years since Jimmy Hayes tragically passed away. It's crazy where the time goes. But Kevin wrote a really well-written a tribute to his brother, and it's posted in the Player Tribune. I would highly recommend you check that out. I'll try to link it in the pinned comment here on the channel, in the top comment on this video, if you want to read through it. It's a really well-written article and tribute here from his video. I just wanted to acknowledge the 2-year anniversary of Jimmy's passing, and certainly, a lot of people are still struggling with it because he was such a big personality and meant so much to so many, especially had a really tight group of friends and family there. So hard to imagine it's 2 years already. But on to a lot of the news. We have a ton of news, signings, PTOs, and some trade talk here at the end of the video as well. Start with a coaching extension. The Arizona Coyotes today announced that they've extended their head coach, Andre Tourigny, for a 3-year extension. So that keeps him under contract for 4 years total, because he had 1 year left on his deal. He originally had a 3-year contract signed when he first became head coach of the Coyotes. He's 2 years into that, was entering the final year, and he gets an extension. It was believed that this would have been done sooner, but he wanted to make sure all of his full staff, assistants, everything were looked after first. So, certainly Andre Tourigny is a well-respected guy within the hockey world, within the coaching world. He's coached a lot through the junior ranks over the years. He had previous NHL experience as an assistant as well. I know he did a year in Ottawa, and I think it was a couple of years in Colorado. He's worked for Team Canada a lot, so certainly a really great coach in that respect. So the Coyotes obviously don't put any of their lack of success on him. He's been doing really well with helping develop their younger players and prospects, and they've seen some improvements there. So certainly a well-deserved contract extension for Tourigny in Arizona. And then as far as some other bigger signings today, we've finally got a deal in place for the Edmonton Oilers and top defenseman Evan Bouchard. I mean, at least I think he's a top defenseman. I know Darnell Nurse's contract says otherwise, but the Nurse contract's certainly an overpayment, which is part of the reason why their cap situation is what it is. It's a big part of it for sure. But Bouchard gets a 2-year contract at $3.9 million. So they really couldn't afford to do much more from a cap perspective. So you could probably say that because of the cap and the fact that Ryan McLeod had he had arbitration rights, so certainly he was able to probably get His contract settled a little bit earlier, which kind of squeezes Bouchard a little bit. But at the end of the day here, it's a very fair contract. There's no doubt about that. I think Bouchard will certainly outplay this deal. My concern is for the next contract, in 2 years' time, when he needs another one, how much he could improve in that time and how much the point production could increase and how much more money he could command. This is going to cost him more long term, and he's up around the same time as Draisaitl. And of course, Draisaitl is going to be, earned himself a hefty raise too. So obviously, it's very much win now time in Edmonton before any future cap crunch gets any worse than what it is there. And the Rangers have finally come to terms with former first overall pick and restricted free agent Alexis Lafreniere, who just completed his ELC. He gets a 2-year deal. His average annual value will be $2.325 million. So comparable to what Kakko is getting. But if you look at a lot of the other first overall picks, in the last 7-8 years that came before Lafreniere, they all got mega deals on their second contracts. Most of them signed, I believe, majority of them are 7 or 8 year deals. And you're looking at, 7 to 10, 12 million, depending on who you're looking at for a player. So it's fair to say that Lafreniere, if you look at the history leading up to, like I said, the last 10 years, certainly one of the slower developing first overall picks. And to a degree, I put that on the player, but I'd also put that on the team too. So I'll be curious to see how this works out and longer term if he can finally become a more explosive player that he was expected to be. But it's difficult when they've, since they drafted him and everything, they've kind of blocked him out from playing top 6 in power play time. So we'll see where this goes, but he's finally under contract at least on a very fair valued contract, in my opinion. We also have a signing in Tampa. They've signed defenseman Jerard Fagerberg, who became a bit of a surprise last year. Certainly proved he could play. Obviously, the Lightning of the last few years, after lots of winning, and as we've talked about with the cap being a problem, they've had to move on from players, and it opened up an opportunity for a guy like Raddysh, who was a bit of an older. Wouldn't call him he's a veteran in a sense of pro hockey, but still new to the NHL, but proved that he could play last year. So he gets a 2-year one-way extension at $975,000. So that's good for him. He can be certainly a third pair D who can rush the puck and be a decent first pass guy, good offensive puck mover. So Raddysh gets a well-earned contract, and we got a bunch of PTOs today. One was very surprising. Actually, this was actually announced, I believe, the day before, but I didn't include it in yesterday's video. I missed the news. But the Avalanche are bringing in Peter Holland on a PTO. Do you remember that name, Peter Holland? If you've been a long-time fan, you probably know the name. Played in the NHL before, but he hasn't played in the NHL since 17-18. That's a long time. He did 2 years in the KHL after that, and 1 year of the SHL in Sweden, and last year he didn't play at all. So I'm not really sure where things stand with him. Obviously, he's older now and well removed from the NHL. I'll be pretty shocked if he gets a contract at all. Maybe they offer him a 2-way deal where he could play in the AHL. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he'd want to do that at the stage of his career, but that one was quite shocking. You don't normally see a player come back, for one, after not playing at all for a while, and then the fact that he's been out of the league for like 5 years. Very surprising. So, so Peter Holland goes to Colorado on a PTO. The Jackets, CBJ, Columbus Blue Jackets, have brought in a few players on PTOs. They've got 3 that they were able to confirm today. One was Nate Schnarr. He's a 24-year-old centerman. He was a Coyotes pick so far, and he has played pro hockey, but only in the American Hockey League. He has not played in the NHL as of yet. So he comes to the Columbus on training camp on a tryout. Goaltender Aaron Dell, he'll go to Columbus on a tryout as well. I could see him maybe getting a contract to be like the third goalie. Their goaltending depth isn't super deep. After you get your 2 guys that are going to make your NHL tandem there, And they also brought in Nick Meloche as well on a PTO. And then longtime veteran Austin Watson is going to Tampa on a tryout. Austin Watson, of course, played the last few years with the Ottawa Senators, started his career with the Nashville Predators, was traded to Ottawa a few years ago. For the most part, it's been a pretty regular there, fourth-line player, obviously not afraid to fight, not afraid to throw big hits, stick up for his teammates. Pretty decent penalty killer, I'll give him that. Not afraid to block shots. Like, he's a tough customer. Doesn't win a lot of his fights, but he's not afraid to jump in there and do what he's got to do. I know there was talk near the end of the season, and he had spoken to the Senators and Pierre Dorion about the possibility of extending. And it seems like the Senators were willing to talk to him on a one-year deal. Doesn't mean for sure that he would have got the contract and would have got signed, but they were willing to talk to him, just like Travis Hamonic, on which Hamonic ended up getting the extra year, which was surprising. But in Watson's case, that's all that they were looking to do. And he was looking for a multi-year deal because, Watson's in his early 30s now, so he figured this might be could possibly be his last contract. And so he was wanting to try to get one more multi-year deal, and there was rumor that he was even looking for 3 years, and he didn't get anything. And now he's got to go to camp on a PTO. Now, I won't be shocked, though, if Tampa figures out a way to sign him for cheap. But I don't see... But you know what? And the way Tampa does business, to be honest, I wouldn't even be shocked if they give him a 2-year deal at, say, $775 or something like that. But most likely, generally, PTOs only result in 1-year contracts. It's not real common to see somebody go on a tryout and get more than that. So maybe he goes in a 1 year, and if they like what they see, maybe they give him another small extension or something. But I could see how they might try to fit him in just to add another level of toughness, but we'll see how things work out. I know he's battled through a lot in his life. Obviously, when he was in Nashville, obviously he ended up having an issue with alcohol, had to go to rehab. After he got to Ottawa, that was well documented, and he was very much a big promoter of helping people and trying to help anybody else who had to overcome things, and certainly very quite open about his journey and what he's been through. So to me, I think he's overcome a lot and seems like good people. So I certainly hope things work out for him with the Lightning. Like I mentioned as well, some trade rumors for today. One, I want to talk a bit about what we seen and heard from Mike Rupp on NHL Network yesterday. Now, yesterday's video, I talked about what his comments were on William Nylander and how he felt a Nylander trade to the Anaheim Ducks were a tremendous opportunity, that it could be a great fit. Well, the other thing, he talked about a few other players too, and one of the other guys he talked about was Connor Hellebuyck, obviously the star goaltender for the Winnipeg Jets, who we know has made it clear to the Jets he's not signing an extension. Now, throughout the entire offseason, we've heard bits and pieces about Hellebuyck, and one of the main things that seems to be holding things up is the fact that Hellebuyck reportedly wants, on his next contract, because he's a pending UFA, similar money to Vasilevsky. Now, he's one of the few goalies around the league who could probably justify asking for that. Now, I don't know that there's many teams that have an appetite out there to give that kind of money to a goaltender right now. A lot of the big money goaltenders, it ties up a lot of room on the cap. They haven't always worked out. It's a little riskier than some. I mean, look at Carey Price, great goalie, skill-wise and what he's done, but now he's got several years where he's not going to play. Obviously, it's a big deal, right? So at the end of the day here, Hellebuyck's worth a lot of money, there's no doubt, but that's kind of scared teams off, because if they can't extend him, they don't want to give up a ton of assets for him. But in Mike Rupp's, opinion, he thinks the Devils are the perfect team for Hellebuyck. We've seen what the Devils have done last year. They certainly had a bit of a breakout year, surprised many, made the playoffs, beat the Rangers, and now the expectations are really high. But the young goaltending tandem of Schmid and Vanecek, I don't want to put the blame all on them. I'm not saying it's all their fault, but if you could throw in an all-star experienced goaltender back on that team, and look at what else they've made more changes again to get even better this offseason, that could be the difference between being a legit cup contender and not. And it could be an opportunity for the Devils to really solidify things And, even if they don't re-sign Hellebuyck, it could be a real situation where they've got a real legit, Stanley Cup opportunity here. This team has come a long way in a short period of time. And they've continued to get better. The last couple off seasons, they've had a lot of good work. And Hellebuyck makes a lot of sense for them. Now, long term, does he stay? Now, if he wins there and he sees the opportunity to win year after year, maybe he gives them a bit of a break on the contract. They have lots and lots of assets, whether it be players on their roster or up-and-coming prospects picks that they could include to intrigue Winnipeg. Maybe they move one of their young goaltenders to the Jets. Maybe Vanacek or Schmid have to go. They don't have to, though. Schmid could still technically go to the minors, but I'm sure the Winnipeg Jets would push to get one of those goalies back in return. You got Alexander Holtz, who's yet to secure a spot on this roster, who could be a really good prospect. They haven't extended Dawson Mercer yet. I don't think New Jersey would want to include him. I really don't. But I know that that's somebody Winnipeg would probably ask for. I don't think they would get him, but they would try. There's no doubt. But they have lots of assets. Like, this team is loaded with young talent, and there's more coming that they don't have necessarily going to have room for long term. So they can afford to part with a few of these pieces to get an all-star goalie. So it does make a ton of sense. Be curious to see if they end up being the team who pulls it off or how things work out between Hellebuyck and Winnipeg. I really think the Jets need to try to get something done because there's no chance he's re-signing, and you don't want to let him walk for nothing. Now, another player I want to talk about, and I'm not going to come out and say that he's going to be traded, but after the little bit of we learned on the interview that Elias Pettersson has completed, which we'll actually hear more of the interview in the next 24 hours. But right now, there's media going on, media availability in Europe for a lot of European players, and all the top insiders and broadcasters are all over there conducting a bunch of interviews. And now Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick are over there for Sportsnet, and they completed a bunch of interviews. And Elliot Friedman obviously had put out a bunch of teasers, quotes, etc. on various interviews. They interviewed William Nylander, Pettersson, Tim Stützle, and a bunch of other European players. And they have a podcast coming out tomorrow with some of those interviews, which the Pettersson one is supposed to be on there. But I know one thing he said, and since this quote from the interview was put out by Friedman, one of the Vancouver media members did speak to Pettersson's agent, Pat Brisson, kind of back things up. And essentially, Pettersson says that he doesn't sound one bit interested in signing an extension right now. And that's got to be concerning for Canucks fans. Essentially, it sounds like they have no desire or anything to sign an extension until the end of next year. And that's depending on how things go. So if you're Canucks or Canucks fans, would you not be concerned? To be completely honest, he says he wants to focus on preparing for the season and getting off to a good start with his team, and that's what's most important, and making sure that he and the team have good starts. His agent, Pat Brisson, said essentially the main focus for him is to perform well. It gives both sides a chance to really evaluate things, and let's sit down at the end of next year and explore where we are. So that is concerning. If they don't really want to entertain an extension until the end of the season, if you think about it from Vancouver's perspective, just from a business perspective, sure, you don't want to panic. You don't want to move him because he's your franchise player. But then you see this comments and you're like, okay, what if we get past the trade deadline and we can't trade him? Now, it doesn't mean they couldn't pull off something in the off season. Before his rights are up, that's possible. But still, it really puts them in a bind if they don't want to talk until the end of the season. What if the Canucks don't have a great season? They miss the playoffs again? Does that mean he's going to really start to be frustrated and want to move on? It makes you wonder, right? So, I'm not here to say that the Canucks are trading Pettersson or Pettersson wants out of Vancouver. That's not what we're saying. But his comments to me certainly, I think, have to offer some concern to Canuck fans, and if I'm the Canucks management and ownership. And the fact that he doesn't even want to talk until the end of the season, that's just concerning. Like, you're going to miss all your chances to trade him if it turns out he doesn't want to leave or doesn't want to stay and he wants to leave. And you don't really want to move him because you want him to stay. But if you can't talk to him until that time, it really puts the handcuffs on and really becomes a catch-22. So like I said, to me, I'm concerned for the Canucks in this scenario. I want to know what the fans think. I want to know what Vancouver fans especially think that they should do here. Do they just hope for the best and talk at the end of the year and hope they can keep them? Or do they really talk to them sooner? And if they can't get a deal done, do they have to move them? You don't want to do that, but it really puts them in a bind. It's kind of like a lot like the Leafs, right? Like it's like a lot of these teams. When you have star players on expiring deals, you can't let them leave for nothing. That really sets your franchise back. And he's an extremely important piece there in Vancouver. But I can understand his perspective, for sure. But it puts the team in an awkward spot, for sure. And I just don't know what's best for handling it. And will we see a knee-jerk reaction? Will they move him? Will they take their chances? I don't know that the Vancouver Canucks, to be honest, can be a playoff team this year. So if it doesn't go well, is it going to be a disaster losing him too? Makes you wonder how things are going to go. Let me know your thoughts on the Pettersson situation in his comments, as well as all the other news discussed today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.